Hello again. Welcome to my channel. Welcome if you're new. I am Marie. I have a 3-year-old boy and we do Montessori homeschooling. So this is the second part video to the other one that I did, which was how I prepared myself for Montessori homeschooling. I talked all about what I did to prepare, the steps I took, and then today I wanted to talk about what I learned from it and what I've learned so far. So we've only been doing it since August, but we've been doing Montessori at home since he was 10 months old. So we've been doing it a while, but the toddler years, they're very different from primary age homeschooling. There's a lot to know and a lot to implement and a lot more kind of academic learning and stuff like that. So I talked about that, and today I want to talk to you about what I've learned from that. Now, this will probably be a little bit of a long video. I'll try not to make it as long as the other one. There was a lot to get into. But afterwards, let me know on Instagram or in the comments below any questions that you have, or what your experience preparing was and how you prepared yourself. So I have my notes over there. If I look over there, that is why, and I will go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I've learned so far is not to worry about the routine, to just go with the flow. And I say that because while I'm not a super routine person myself, for some reason, being kind of the sole person in charge of my child's education, other than himself, obviously, because he's the one doing the learning, but the one preparing it all, the adult environment, it was a lot of pressure, or still is a lot of pressure, and having a routine kind of gave me comfort. Written out what we were going to be doing at each time of day, that made me feel confident and secure. Honestly, as we started getting going, got our footing and figured out what worked for us, I kind of let go of the routine. I did post our routine if you want to see it on Instagram, kind of what we did. It is not something that you have to follow. You don't even have to follow a routine, but if it works out for you, you can try it. I would just say though that children don't learn, on a timed environment. They don't learn exactly when you want them to. I mentioned in my previous video that my son takes after me a bit, and he's kind of a night owl. So a lot of his best, most concentrated learning happens right before bed at like 7:30, 8 o'clock. So if I schedule it out, I definitely wouldn't have put his, however long, hour-long work cycle, deep concentration part of his work cycle at 8 o'clock at night. But it's what works for him. So recognizing that and going with the flow and adjusting our day as needed has really worked out for us. He is focusing and getting way more into his activities and materials than he ever was whenever I set out that blocked 3-hour time period of this is work time. And he didn't like that. So we don't do a schedule anymore. We just follow our own rhythm. And sometimes it changes. Sometimes it's different every day, sometimes every week. And the last few weeks, he's been super into working, and he just spends all day long doing shelf work. And then the week before that, he just wanted to do practical life all week. And I think the week before that, he just wanted to do gross motor stuff and climb things and, jump off the bed and stuff like that. So focusing really on what is working for him and what he wants to do, because you cannot force learning. You can't force them to be interested, and you can't force them to concentrate, especially at 3 years old. So that was the first thing that I've learned. I've also learned that I wish I had realized this, because I gave myself a lot of kind of flack for it and felt really guilty, but you don't have to have it all completely put together, all the materials, everything to get started. You don't have to have every part of the sequence of materials in Montessori. You don't have to have all the shelves. You don't have to have any shelves. You don't have to have any shelf work. Montessori is all about life with your child, about giving them the things that they need to explore, to learn, and the materials are really great for that, because it fills that gap of what they're wanting to manipulate and work with to, build their brains, basically, to develop their minds. But there are other ways they can do that too. So if you can't afford the materials right now, you can still get started. You can still homeschool. You can do practical life. You can involve them in everything that you do, to the best of their ability. You can get out of the house and get into nature, count sticks. You don't have to have the spindle box with the counting sticks. Go out and count sticks outside. We gathered acorns and counted acorns and stuff like that. So I wish I hadn't beat myself up about it as much. Honestly, for a while, even before we got started homeschooling, I was really worried that we couldn't, have an entire Montessori school in our home, which would be awesome, but it's not necessary. And, keeping in mind that it's okay to do piece by piece. We started with one shelf in the living room, and then we just added to it as our activities and materials grew. And that really worked for us, and I didn't need to feel guilty because now, end of December, middle of December, we're doing great, and he's really engaged in his learning and his activities. So that would be one thing. Also being okay with the work on the shelves gathering dust. Sometimes children don't want to do shelf work. Sometimes I think of it as a hobby or project. Say you're really into doing art or woodworking or crocheting or something. You might not want to do that every single day, all day long, or even for an hour a day. You might get really into it for a while and you're just crocheting all the time or something like that. And then you just drop it for a while and you do something else. You move on. Maybe you just start, being into listening to podcasts more or whatever. So kids do the same thing. They don't want to focus on the same stuff all the time. And it doesn't even mean that your shelf work is not appropriate or not what they're needing. They just need a break from it, and that's okay too. And going back to practical life or getting outdoors more, or maybe focusing on gross motor activities. Maybe they just need to move all day long. Children kind of go through mental growth spurts where they have things that they just kind of repeat and repeat and repeat. And it's not just about building the pink tower or doing the knob cylinders. It's also about jumping over pillows or jumping off the couch over and over and over all day long, or going outside and running circles around trees or whatever. So those things are just as important, and the key is following your child. So as long as they're getting what they need and they feel fulfilled and happy and focused on something, it doesn't matter if it's your shelf work. And if your shelf work gathers dust, that's fine. Obviously, observing and making sure that you're providing them what they're wanting. If they go to their shelves and they're interested, but they're just not getting deep into something, then yeah, maybe you need to look at more materials or rotate something. But it's okay if they're just not into your shelf work or their shelf work for a while. And then also see everything as a guide and do what works for you. So something that I stressed a lot about, because I do love to research, so I read a lot, was the scope and sequence, and I just wanted to follow it perfectly. I wanted to follow an exact guideline of what we should do and when. But it doesn't work that way in Montessori, for the very obvious reason that, again, we're following the child, and nobody can predict what a child's going to want at any given time. I even looked into, online Montessori albums or curriculums or, subscription boxes and things like that. And the problem with a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them, is that they give you this curriculum to follow. And what if your child's not into that time? Then you've just wasted a lot of money on something. So I wanted that. I would have felt a lot more comfortable and secure with that. But ultimately, I had to say, okay, here's a general outline of what the sequence should be. Or, when you should introduce the materials, such as first the knob cylinders, then the pink tower, or first the pink tower, then the brown stair, or something like that. And then just figure out what works for you. So not beating yourself up about it if you don't have the budget for all of that yet, or if you can only afford one thing and it's going to be quite a while before you can get another, or if you just can't find what you need. Also, I had a lot of problems finding dressing frames, even from the outlet stores. And I thought about DIYing some, sewing some, and eventually I just put a coat with a zipper and a coat with buttons on the back of a chair. And it worked great. So just kind of going with what works for you, both your budget and your child, is really important, and not to beat yourself up about it. And not to stick rigidly to any kind of guide, because ultimately that's just going to cause you more stress. Because your child's not going to be into it, or you're going to feel overwhelmed because you're just trying to observe, trying to rotate, trying to have life in your house at the same time as homeschooling. And then trying to be on top of a sequence of activities or a curriculum at the same time is a lot of work. So take a breath, just go with the flow, and how it works out, it will work out. Next, I would say, see your child's workspace, their classroom, their corner, their shelf, whatever it is. See it as their space. So eventually, I'm guilty of this, maybe you are too. Eventually, you're going to have to stop obsessing over how to arrange the materials, or if it's attractive enough, or if we have enough on the shelves, how many things should we have on the shelves, whatever. And eventually, you're just going to have to say, okay, it's theirs. This is their space now. They'll tell me if it's not working, and then I'll adjust it. But I don't have to be the one in control. I can let them explore and then figure it out. So stepping back and just letting them enjoy it. I don't need to be there for his entire work cycle. Yes, be available in case he has questions or he's frustrated and needs redirected a little bit, or a lesson given or whatever at any given time. But I don't have to be there, and it can be his space. So setting up for independence is huge for that, because then that way it can be their space. So you might have a drawer in your kitchen where they can reach their utensils and plates. You might have a shelf where you've got art supplies, just all that stuff that they need ready for them. And then just stepping back and just letting nature take its course, letting them, do the learning, because ultimately we're just setting up the environment and we're supporting them. So that was something I had to learn. So you might have to too, but it's worth learning. And then also, this one, I get questions about this a lot. So concentration span and deep concentration. It's something that when you read about it, or at least a lot of the sources, when you read about it, it sounds like if you set up the environment this way, it'll be good to go, and the child will just jump in and focus for hours. Their 3-hour work cycle, they'll work for 3 hours and be really into it and focused. But that's not actually how it works. It does take a bit of research and digging to find kind of the details of how work cycles for children work and how concentration, and there's a term normalization in Montessori, which just means they get to the place where they feel fulfilled and they worked hard and they're satisfied with what they worked on, and then just kind of that everything's right with the world kind of feeling, like you feel when you finish a project. So that isn't something that just happens, if you set up the shelves right. So it can take a long time, and it takes practice for them. Just like for you, reading or learning, it takes practice to really get to the point where you can concentrate on something and really take it in for a long period of time. So with the work cycle, I do have a post on Instagram about work cycles. It can look like playing with a lot of different things for a short amount of time, and before they really find the one thing that they want to work on. And even then, they might not work on it for like an hour. They might not even work on it for 30 minutes. But they'll be focused. They'll be like, okay, this is what I want to work on. And they'll be working on it. And you might see them repeat it. But it takes practice for them. So even when they get to the point where they've developed deep concentration, they might still need a good 3 hours, 2.5 hours of work time where they're just doing gross motor or, pouring or whatever in little jobs before they have like 30 minutes of like deep concentration. Now, after they've practiced a while, you might get spans where they might do it for an hour or 2 hours. But it takes a long time, so don't expect it to happen right away. Don't even expect it to happen in the first few months. My son is just now getting to the point where he really concentrates and focuses on things, and it's not the same every day. It depends on how much he slept or his mood or, stars aligning or whatever. So just keep that in mind and just be happy kind of always reaching for that, always that being the goal. But don't worry about if you achieve it every time, if they achieve it every time. Just try to, help it along as much as possible, and it'll happen on its own. Next was making sure that we put out the amount of activities that work best for us. So both for budget reasons, but also just child's personality reasons. So I have gotten comments before on our shelf pictures that I post about the amount of activities we have, because we range anywhere from like, I'd say 12 to maybe 18 activities out at a time. And I know they say less is more, but I tried less is more for my child and it didn't work for him. When there was only, 10 activities out, he got bored really fast, even if they were things that he would normally or now focus on for a long time. It wasn't enough for him because in his work cycle, he needs to do a lot of little things for short amount of time. A little puzzle or a matching activity or, little pre-sewing activities and things like that before he builds up enough interest to focus. So when I only have 10 activities out, he just wasn't getting engaged, even if, it was something he liked. When I started to put more 16, 18 activities out for him, suddenly I saw him in he calls it his office, his homeschool space, his office, for literally like 4 or 5 hours every afternoon for the last couple weeks. And some days, maybe not quite as much, but he's in there and he's excited and he's working. And that's what I want to see. So I'm not going to stick by a rigid rule of less is more because it's overwhelming, because it wasn't overwhelming him and he was a lot happier when I put a lot more out. So just consider that. It might be opposite for your child. 10 activities might be way too many. They might only want 5 activities. And that's okay. As long as you're following the child and it's working for them, that's what you should do. And then lastly, I wanted to say that I wish I had realized sooner that it's okay for me to play or work with him in his office, his homeschool space, if he wants me to. I started out, this is silly, but I started out like our first few weeks that if he was like, Mama, come do this with me, come do knob cylinders. And I'm like, this is your work time. You do it. This is your work time. I'm not going to interrupt. This is important for you. And then he just didn't want to do it. And he'd stop. And so eventually I got to the point where I was like, okay, he's not doing what he was going to do because I'm not joining him. And he's a very independent child. He's not the kind of child that wants me there all the time. So I started to realize, if he's asking me, that's him inviting me into his space, his work, just like I do with, my hobbies or household chores. He wants to invite me in and show me. And in a Montessori classroom, he would be surrounded by other children of various ages that he would be working with, or he might invite to say, hey, look how I do this. Oh, do you want to give it a try? And that's part of him kind of taking on the role of teacher or socializing and connecting. And social connection while we learn things, helps us learn it a lot better. So I decided, you know what? No, I'm not interrupting him and saying, let me show you how to do this. Let me do this with you if he's not wanting me to. But if he's inviting me, absolutely, I'll do it. So if he's in the middle of his work cycle and he's like, oh, I'm building a pink tower. Here, you put this block on. I don't go, no, this is yours. You do it. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Show me how. And I let him teach me. And it's really special. I feel really honored that he wants to do that with me, share his special work. But at the same time, I know that he's connecting and learning more because we're doing it together, or he's watching the way I do it. Maybe he just wants to watch me a little bit more on, after giving him an initial lesson. Maybe he just wants to see how I do it again without having to sit down for a formal lesson. So keeping that in mind has been huge, and it's made homeschooling a lot more fun because we're both into it, and it's really fun to do it together. So those are some of the things I've learned. I just wanted to share with you. Again, I've only been doing it for a few months, officially homeschooling, but I feel like I've learned a lot so far, and I've read a lot more even since then. So I just wanted to share that a bit with you. I'd love to know from you how you prepared yourself, what steps you took, and what you wish you'd done differently, or what you've learned so far from your experience. Even if it's only been a week, comment below, or let me know on Instagram, because this community that we have, this Montessori community, and especially our homeschooling community, we learn so much from each other, and I love hearing from you guys. So that is it. I hope you found this helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that stuff, and I will see you next time. Bye.